We have three different sections of OER that we are reading this week: 4.11, Rhetorical and Literary Devices; 10.4, Literary Criticism, Psychoanalytic; and Chapter 12, again, we're getting back into literary research. There's some aspects of these that I want to discuss, go over, and things I just think are kind of cool. 4.11 gets into rhetorical and literary devices. This is very parallel to the idea of like rhetorical devices in the sense of essay writing or essay reading. When we're looking at rhetorical and literary devices within literature, we're thinking about how the author is utilizing language or words in order to convey meaning to the reader. When we're thinking about it in terms of writing essays, we're thinking about how we're utilizing rhetoric to persuade the reader, to convey some persuasion. So we have the rhetorical triangle, if you'll think back to college composition, that gave us the language, began to give us some concepts, the Greek concepts of ethos, pathos, and logos, which are approximations to different ways in which arguments are made. And rhetoricians can look at those and kind of analyze an argument through those lenses and evaluate how the author is trying to persuade and gauge the general effectiveness of rhetoric or the persuasion within. 4.11, the rhetorical and literary devices, starts to give us the same type of landscape, language that we can kind of key in on, the metaphor and similes, looking at how repetition is utilized. Getting into literary devices like imagery, and it has a nice little table there, and symbolism and allegory. So these, it's just starting to touch into it. These are just a few of the things. This is opening the universe of exploration when we think about how different devices are utilized in the construct of literature to convey or evoke emotion or convey meaning. And again, I just saw the corollary between literary devices and rhetorical devices because we are still in a composition class. And as we think about the essays that we construct, we are supporting a thesis. We have an argument that we're trying to make. And we're utilizing rhetoric in order to support that. And every single thing that you include within your essay is a rhetorical decision that you're making in order to further your specific argument. And much in that same way, when we look at literary works, they are utilizing rhetorical and literary devices to convey and affect meaning. So I think that's really cool. I just wanted to touch base on that and kind of point out those two touchstones. Psychoanalytic criticism. This is really cool. Again, this is very brief for what it is. If you were going to get into psychoanalytic criticism, it is a much broader school. And if you're going to utilize this type of lens by which you're going to evaluate a piece of literature, you're really going to have to do some research on it. There are some pieces of research that are utilized within this, but I think that they illustrate some good points. First, it illustrates to us how you can utilize research in order to support an idea. But at the same time, since this OER is just giving us a very top down look, a very high level look at what psychoanalytic criticism would look like, it's not going to go super deep. It's not going to really explore all of the different tenets. This is, not a specific course on that. So this is getting very, very general. And we see that here when we're looking at Poe through the lens of psychoanalytic criticism. And the OER brings in Freud and says, Freud, for example, contends that dreams are the guardians of sleep, where they become disguised fulfillments of repressed wishes. To Freud, dreams are the royal road to the personal unconscious of the dreamer and have a direct relation to literature, which often has structures of dreams. Okay, that's cool. It's very general. If you're going to really do a psychoanalytic critical review utilizing Freud as a lens, think about just how deep Freud gets, whether it's ego, superego, and id. Just the idea that you're going to evoke the idea of repression and think about how Freud utilizes, discusses, analyzes repression would require a lot more than just simply dropping that one line and thinking that proves, oh, look, I did a psychoanalytical review or criticism of Edgar Allan Poe with that one piece of research. And the OER is simply trying to give us an example of how this is used. It's overly general. It doesn't get into the specifics, but it is displaying kind of, just an idea of how it might work. But I did want to show that because I do see essays where students will drop a little bit of research and think like, well, that should carry the day. And it simply doesn't, and you can see this again when it gets into Lacan. Lacan, a disciple of Freud, was influenced by Freud's psychoanalytical theories and contended that dreams mirrored our unconscious. Now, again, these are just stacked on top of each other. Freud, much deeper, requires a lot more context, explanation, and diving in and application if you're going to utilize that. But stacking Freud right there with Lacan, and I think it's even evoking dreams mirrored the mirror theory, which is like a triad, very much more complicated than the OER is giving us. Again, it's just demonstrating a theory or demonstrating how it might be applied. It's not saying this is how you would do it, so to speak. And then, of course, it goes on to Carl Jung, the collective unconscious, another fantastic theory that requires a lot more than just a simple sentence. But this does give us a taste of what psychoanalytic criticism is. I also thought it was kind of ironic that it's kind of showing us how research can be utilized in an underwhelming way by overgeneralizing and trying to evoke that it's carrying much more water than it is in such a small, compacted paragraph where three different pieces of heavy psychoanalytic critical theory is being dropped rather briefly for a description of Poe. All right, so this does give us a little bit of a snapshot, which I definitely like. Now, let's get into 12.12, where we get into literary research. We did have a reading earlier that discussed a little bit of literary research. This gets back into it. It's very timely because we have an essay where we are talking about the canon, and we have two different stories which we're trying to figure out if they fit into the canon. Now, since we're doing an essay on this, this is not simply an opportunity for you to, take the story Young Goodman Brown or The Yellow Wallpaper and say, I've read it, I liked it, I think other people should read it. Therefore, it should be in the canon. We need research to back this up. When I start this essay, and I gave a little bit within the essay prompt of how I would go about it, I would really just start with the foundation of research. I would read the story, I would understand it. But then I would do outside research, not relying on the OER, not relying solely on Harold Bloom for a definition of canon. I would do some research to kind of find out some criteria by which I can establish in my essay an idea of criteria for canon, some specification of where this canon is even located. And then after that, I would go ahead and start to do some research on the story itself. Where does it fit, historically? Where does it fit culturally? How does this fit into the zeitgeist or the spirit of that time? And I would try to figure out exactly what did this story even mean when it was written? And then what does it even mean to me today? So I do think that there is some setting up of the story that needs to be done as well. Both of these things requiring some research, which is why I'm getting into this right now. This does get into some aspects of process of writing, got some pre-writing with brainstorming. I think that stuff's fine. Then we get into the annotated bibliography, and I think this is some real gold. You can see what this is, where they have, the annotated bibliography, where we have the working title here, and then a little bit of annotation about what's in that piece of work. If you're doing a lot of research and you start to come across things multiple times, or you need to refer back to something, an annotated bibliography can save your bacon, at least in terms of time, because it gives you a quick refresh of exactly what was in that one piece of research. So also, I always like keeping a working bibliography, just of the things that I'm looking at when I'm doing my research. That way, when it comes to doing my works cited, when I'm done with my essay, I can see what I utilized, and then I can just cut and paste, drop it into my works cited. And that's just because at the end of doing all the heavy lifting that a paper requires, I hate to have to go back and look at all the sources and try to figure out where they came from and then construct my bibliography for my works cited. So anyway, that's just one thing. The other aspect of it is, and this is especially true when you get into your specific field of study, is figuring out like who the movers and the shakers are. Who are the people that have the predominant ideas right now? When you do research in undergrad or, just early within your discipline, if you start to notice who's writing what and keep track of it, it'll help your research later. This doesn't matter if you're going to be an English person, whether you're going to get into kinesiology or whether you're going to do like IT security. Getting a working annotated bibliography and starting to list out the different people who are writing within your specific field of discipline will help you when you get into advanced degree work, or even just further along within your discipline. So that's a pro tip. I wish somebody would have mentioned that to me when I was working on my undergraduate stuff. So anyway, that is a reading that we have this week. I'm really excited about it. I think it's extremely informative, and I really dig it. So thanks a lot.